1970, just finishing foundation course, I didn't know whether to do graphic design or become a sculptor. And I mentioned it to my dad, and my dad said, do whatever you're happiest doing. You can always go onto a building site to earn money. 42 years later, I'm still happy. I'm making sculpture, and I'm making my own building sites. I'm here tonight, this afternoon, to talk about one particular piece of work, just to show a kind of structural daring and the limits that one can go to within sculpture, and slightly outside of the conventions. But there are reasons why I do these things. I suppose what I'm really fundamentally about is to challenge preconceptions we have of our world. And for me, the best way of doing that is to take things that we think we know, objects, buildings, ships, aeroplanes, etc., and tweak them in such a way that we look again at them and discover that there are surprising and rewarding other issues that are discovered. I've just got a couple of pieces to sort of give you the background to... Can you see that one? This is called 2050. This is a room filled with waste oil. You can be arrested for pouring this down the drain. It's a hazardous waste material, but here people only talk about it with notions of beauty. So that gives you some idea of the challenges I set up with these sculptures. Going backwards here. The second piece I want to show you is where this aligns itself to the piece I'm going to talk about, where I don't actually bring from the studio an object. I will go to a gallery space and I will tweak it in some kind of way. In this situation, I've taken a window and I've removed it from its known boundary and brought it in. So the world has expanded into the interior space, and the interior space has shrunk somewhat. So here we're dealing with an issue where the sculpture isn't an object anymore, it's an installation, and it has a term called site specificity. And I suppose I'm really known as a site-specific artist. And in that respect, this is currently a permanent piece of work down at Holborn. It's on the corner of the London School of Economics. It's actually a chameleon work. It sits on a host building, and it's actually a copy. It's actually a chamfered corner where I've actually built a section of building to square the building. I've changed the footprint of that building by the use of sculpture. And in order to free up the walkway, what we did in the mould is we just crushed the whole thing up, and it allowed people to use the pavement, and we've just got a pile of rubble. Now, this is the lead piece for the one I'm going to talk about now. This was made in 1990, and it was through happy accident in gluing something that actually misglued and fell over that I found this idea. And it took me 9 years until 2007 when I was able to produce the piece of work. There were situations where I found the money, but I didn't find the building. And there were situations where I found the building, but wasn't able to find the money. It was to do with location and whether someone would finance something out of London, etc. But this piece was called Overeasy. It's what Americans do with eggs. And it actually is just a 8-meter bearing that oscillates backwards and forwards. The transparent becomes opaque, the opaque becomes transparent. It was a piece of work that they were wanting to somehow flag up what the building was about. It used to be the old Dovecot Art Centre. It's called the Arc, and the piece is performing. It's a performing centre. It's got a theatre, it's got 3 gyms, it's got 2 bars. It doesn't have a visual arts gallery, but it has theatres, cinema, that kind of thing. So the piece is really a flag-waving piece to describe what's going on in the building. And the piece can be seen from inside as to from the outside. It moves just about the speed of a second hand on the clock. So it's moving backwards and forwards 300 degrees over a period of about a minute. But that takes us up to Liverpool. This is 2006. I was invited by the Liverpool Biennale to go up and to, in some way, make a flag-waving piece for the European Capital of Culture. Liverpool had been awarded central government money, Tony Blair's money, to rejuvenate that region. Liverpool had won that pot of money. And for the critics who I met at that time, if that money hadn't have gone to Liverpool and been spent on a cultural festival, that money would have gone elsewhere. It would have gone to either Cardiff or Sheffield. And the hidden agenda there, of course, is if you've got a city that's doing wonderful creative stuff, it means that people who want to set up industries in those rural I say rural, in those kind of cities that are outside of the capital. You know, say you want to set up a car company. You know, it's having these kind of festivals that draw people's attention and think, well, actually, that's a happening place. I might settle down here and develop something myself. But this is the discarded. This is the written off. This is the thing that we pull down and we want to build over. And my idea here was to take something of Liverpool, to take a bit of its history, something that was written off, discarded, and to say something about it sculpturally, so we start to look again at what we dismiss. It's on a street called Moorfields, and passers-by don't look at this. It's not worth looking at, in one sense. It used to be the old Yates's Wine Lodge, where they used to serve Aussie whites. And I came up with an idea to do something to architecture which is not necessarily familiar. I mean, architecture's moving all the time. We pull it down. Our cities are being pulled down and rebuilt. We do our DIY at weekends. This room is vibrating. There's vibrations going on. There are computer programs that will tell you how much this building is actually vibrating. So architecture does move, but we have this concept that steel and concrete are permanent, you know, is permanent substance, permanent stuff. But what I wanted to do is to take the order of architecture, I suppose, the notion of repetition and regimentation, and turn it on its head. So the piece is called Turning the Place Over. It's what burglars do if they break into your house. But in this situation, what I was doing is taking the rules that we tend to have govern us, and in that respect, you know, the analogy here being architecture, and saying that we don't have to be repetitive and regimental. What we can do with architecture can be sort of fun. So a set of models, how all the pieces have been made over the years. Number one, I start 3D, and then it'll go to scribbles, but it's predominantly working with models and looking at those models and trying to visualize the way in which the piece will sit best in the world. So the first one is to get the idea and then to fine-tune that idea to the best way it can exist. And so this was a little exhibition we put on during the running of that piece. We switched on in 2007, June, to create a focus for Liverpool, and it was supposed to run until 2008. We ran until late 2011, so it's just been switched off this year. It's a temporary piece of work. As I say, it's titled Turning the Place Over, and it's a 10-meter ovoid section of the building that's been pastry cut, as it were, out of 3 floors, mounted onto a spindle, and then set onto a set of rollers that you use in the nuclear industries for welding up nuclear flues or hulls on ships, so the thing will rotate. And then a set of engines, electric engines, that powered the thing up and ran through the hours of daylight. So it would probably switch on about 7 in the morning and switch off about 8, 9 in the evening. And these are just a couple of ideas showing you how the piece was worked. Very democratic for me. I mean, I don't work on the computer. I don't do CAD. The engineers I work with, and all these things, by the way, are collaborations. They're about working with teams of people, and we all get to know each other by first name, and I go in with my cardboard, my toilet rolls, and whatever else, and they start drawing on them, and then someone gets on the computer, and then you've lost it. You watch them, unfortunately. But, I mean, masses of teams, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, structural engineers, no architects, funny enough. I suppose I take that job. And then, of course, a fabricating firm. So, first of all, with the building, we had to give it a facelift. In order to cut 3 floors, we had to pull the forehead, the roof, the top floor. We had to pull it back, stiffen the whole thing crudely. It was done as a fabrication job, strictly, rather than an engineering job. I mean, we were controlled by a budget. We had to work within that. The contingency was very, very fine. So this is just steels welded in on the main frame, just showing you where we've peeled away at the building. I'm only able to do these things because I'm given permission, i.e. this is being pulled down. It still hasn't been pulled down. The piece is still there, although not switched on. But it's only possible to do this kind of thing. It's not that I'm a maverick, I am a maverick, but it's not that I go in there and vandalize architecture. I actually sensitively choreograph the architecture. And so here you can see where we've actually taken away the section of the facade once the thing was pinned back. And here what we've done is, rather than take that pastry cut and cut out the circle, it's a little sleight of hand that I as an artist can do, where we actually take away a rectilinear area, we then insert everything, cut the floors, and then put back the facade on a framework, on a steel coat hanger, and then rebuild with the existing material and put back the building. So these are just sort of working shots to give you some idea of the kind of, I suppose, high-end energy that was used by these fabricators. I mean, they were really behind the project. And in actual fact, doing very, very well up in the northeast. They were a small Lancashire project. We went to the big companies, and they turned it all down. We went to 4 major teams in the northwest. They said, there's not enough profit in it, Richard. They went back to their ex-homes, to produce. But we found this little outfit who have really blossomed. So this is just looking now at where the steelwork's going in, and where we've got to cantilever across. We've got the structure going in, being craned up. That's the spindle, 14 meters, slewing on the end. And, the crane there lifting up. So everything was put in through that big envelope, that big sort of letterbox that was cut into the building. You can see there the floors being cut away and stiffened to allow the oscillation of this piece of work to work both into the building and outside the building as well. This is the idle rollers at the front end of the section, and these are the electric motors. Used very, very little electricity. There was one comment about, whether this was eco-friendly. Was I burning a lot of juice? In actual fact, it's the gearboxes doing all the work. And that's the spindle ready to have the central area, the central coat hanger, that piece, that section there, the ovoid section, to have all the facade replaced back onto it. And then the stonework went on. The stonework was all 100 mil thick, and in order to be able to do this, we're dealing with 26 ton on the move. In order to reduce it from 54, we went down to 26 by cutting the stone in half. So we had 100 mil thicknesses, all taken down to 50 mil by a stonemason. And accurate cutting, that's the little gap that gives you an idea of how the piece meets the static part of the building. Obviously, there's got to be a certain amount of clearance to allow ourselves to spin. And that's the piece of work ready to be switched on. And of course, we had a big launch, we had a big speech ceremony, the team were up there, and our private view audience came out, and the piece was switched on. Very interesting story. In 2008, the Turner Prize was launched up in Liverpool, because it was the European capital of culture up there, as I've already said. And a taxi driver was at the station. I said, listen, can you get me to... I went up there, by the way. I went up to Liverpool for the opening. And I went to the taxi driver and I said, can you take me to Tate Liverpool? So he sets off in the car and he says, what are you going there for? And I said, well, it's the Turner Prize. And he started saying, what a load of rubbish, what a waste of money, etc. And I said, well, I think it's all right. He said, well, are you an artist? And I said, yeah, I am. And he said, I tell you, I'll take you to see a bit of art. Have you got time? And I said, yes, okay. And he drove me to my own work. And I said, Jesus, that's fantastic. And he said, no, you've got to get out the car and look at it. And he came round and opened the door and said, you've got to get out, you've got to stand in front of it. And I got out and stood in front of it for 5 minutes. And I said, that's the most amazing thing I've seen. He said, it is, isn't it? And I didn't have the heart to tell him it was mine. I just think he would have thought I was crazy. Anyway, I'm going to end on the film now, just to show you what it does. Thank you very much.